Hello and welcome back to this set of videos all about how to stretch your hamstrings, or how to loosen your hamstrings, or how to correct your tight hamstrings. In the last video we talked about altered reciprocal inhibition, which is the communication of muscles, which tells, the communication is when one muscle contracts, the other muscle has to relax. So when it comes to tight hamstrings, these get so overused that they become in such a sort of a dominant contraction state, making all the muscles around it become less active, I'll say. So what we have to do is we have to start activating these muscles around it a lot more, which then takes the stress off the hamstrings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about this synergistic dominance. So synergistic dominance is a neuromuscular phenomenon that occurs when synergists take over function for a weak or inhibited prime mover. Now what that means, they'll talk about it later on, but we've got the glutes here, and I use the example of runners. Now you can, cyclists or gym enthusiasts who go in and do squats and deadlifts and all these types of exercises, people who sit down for a lot of time of the day, so they sit in an office or they sit in a car, the glute muscles here become inactive or inhibited or inactive, however you want to call it. What that does, that's the prime mover. The synergist, which is an assisting muscle, are the hamstrings. Now what happens when these become inactive, these then become overactive to compensate for the inactivity in this muscle here. And then they become overused and give the illusion of being tight. So what we need to do is we need to activate these muscles, again by standing for longer periods of the day, for when we exercise, training these muscles, so thinking about these muscles contracting. That's what we need to start doing to then bring this synergistic dominance, or lessen this synergistic dominance. So think of this as your body's substitution system. When a starting player on a sports team gets tired, the coach puts in a backup player. The backup player can perform the task necessary to play, but not quite as well as the starter. So that's what we're talking about. These guys become tired or inactive or inhibited, and then these guys come in and do the job but not quite as well, and then give us this illusion of tightness. So the nervous system reacts in the same manner. For example, when the psoas, which is the hip flexor at the front of the hip here, is tight, it leads to reciprocal inhibition of the gluteus maximus. So what they're saying is when this muscle here at the front of the hip, or it joins onto the spine, comes down to the front of the hip, when that becomes tight, that turns off, because that one's so active, that turns off the glutes. When the glutes are turned off, that then makes these hamstrings overactive, giving the illusion of that's tight and that's tight. So the result is increased force output of the synergist of the hip extensor, which is the hamstring, the abductor magnus, which is on the inside of the leg, and the erector spinae, which is at the lower part, or this portion of the back, where it does go all the way up, but mainly this portion of the back. This causes faulty movement patterns, leading to arthrokinetic dysfunction and altered force-couple relationships, decreasing neuromuscular efficiency and eventually leading to injury, which is what a lot of runners, cyclists, people in gyms, people who sit down for a long time in the day, in offices or in cars, whatever that might be, they're tight through the hip flexors. That inactivates the glutes, so then all the synergists, all the assisting muscles around the glutes, have to compensate for these inactive glutes. And then what happens, in all these synergists, they give the illusion of they're tight. So what I'm going to be talking about in the next 3 videos is how to correct that. So it's how to activate these, it's how to turn those muscles on so we can start turning off and relieving the stress and the pressure on all these muscles, which will give you a lot more flexible hamstrings, a lot more flexible through the hip, and a lot more flexible through the back and the inside of the legs. Okay, so my name is Christopher Hull from ChristopherHull.com. I'll speak to you in the next video.